So to address some of your power management needs, and to some extent your cable management needs, you can invest in a power delivery system such as this, which is the PegasusAstro Pocket Powerbox Advance. I'll go through the details of what this unit can do very shortly, but what you get with this box is a temperature and humidity probe. You get 4 DC power cables. These are standard 5.5mm on the outside, 2.1mm on the inside, and they are positive tip. You also get a cable to power this box, and the important thing to say about this is whatever you're plugging this into, and you can just plug a DC straight into this box, a DC power pack, is it must be 12 volts, but more importantly it must be 10 amps, and I'll go through why that is required later on. You also get this monstrosity of a cable, which is a USB 3 data cable. This is used to connect this box to your imaging laptop or Mac or whatever device you're using. And the reason I don't like this was 1, it's too long, 2, it's not very flexible, and 3, even though it's very similar to this, I don't like it. So I chucked that away and I purchased this off Amazon, which again is a standard USB 3 data cable. It's braided, it's the right length that I need, and it's a lot more flexible, and it's black and I can hide it. So let's talk about what the box is capable of. We'll talk about the power delivery outputs first. So we have 4 12-volt outputs here. These you would connect to things like your camera, your focuser, your mount, anything that needs a 12-volt power, this can provide that. Now I mentioned earlier that the ampage of the power that you're providing to the box itself needs to be at least 10 amps, and this is why it's important. So if you think about your camera may need 5 amps, especially if it's a cooled camera. Your mount may need 3 amps, and say your focuser needs 1 amp. So that's 9 amps in total. So that's why you need to provide at least 10 amps into a box like this. If you're only running a couple of devices off this, say a focuser and a mount, you may get away with a 5 amp power supply. But there's no harm in providing over ampage. There's harm in providing over voltage. So I would always recommend you provide at least 10 amps into this box from the power that you're using to power it with. Moving on to the dew heaters. So we have 2 traditional RCA dew heater outputs. These are fully controllable in software and can be set into an automatic mode. I'll go through that very shortly when I show you the software. And the thing to point out with the unit is you can actually run the unit without needing to connect it to a PC. So it remembers the settings once you've set them once. And if you power this box up without connecting it to a PC, it will just run in its last configuration. That's a really useful feature, especially if someone doesn't want to have a device out there with them. And finally, you've got the 12-volt DC input. So this is where this needs to go to provide the 12-volt 10-amp supply. Then on the flip side, we have the 4-port USB 3 hub. Now, one thing to point out about this hub is port number 1 is USB 3 only. And what we found, and especially the community that I'm members of, is some cameras, and ZWO and QHY are categorized in this, they negotiate their USB connection by starting off in USB 2 and then flick to USB 3. This causes this a problem. So my camera, my ZWO ASI 071 and both my 2600 camera, they will not work when you plug it into port 1. They will appear to work, and then they will start to do odd things like disconnect. It's not a known issue. Basically, PegasusAstro, when I approached them, said the cameras are actually at fault. It is not a genuine total USB 3 device that you're plugging into it. ZWO need to change the way that they negotiate the USB 3 connection. So that's something you just have to stick with. So whilst I've got 4 ports, I only use 3, which is more than fine. So the things you can plug into the USB 3 hub is things like your mount, your guide scope, anything that is USB 3s, and as long as you're connecting it to your PC, this is acting as a USB 3 hub. And then finally, we've got this port on the side, and this is where the temperature and humidity probe plugs in. And what this does is provide feedback into the software, which I'll go through shortly, showing you your temperature and humidity, but it also graphs it. So you can spot where the temperature is dropping overnight. That might trigger a refocusing. You can also see the humidity, and also in the software you also see the power input and output demands of the box. The box overall is really lightweight, doesn't weigh very much. I will put the specification above of what the total weight of the box is. It's in a lovely anodized aluminium case. Looks really nice. This on the back, or on the bottom, is a Velcro strip. This does not come with the box. This is how I attach it to my Losmandy dovetail. There are actually, you'll notice that there's holes on the side. There are a number of brackets that you can buy from PegasusAstro that allow you to attach this to things like Intel NUCs and other mounting systems. But overall, it's changed the way I image on a night. And what I mean by that is, one, my cable management is so much tidier now. So there's no chance of me having snags. I don't have to take out at least 3 or 4 12-volt power packs, which is what I used to have to do to power my camera, my mount, my focuser. And it saves on setup and teardown time. So one of the things I hate is, I love setting up, but I hate tearing down, because even though it sounds trivial, unplugging 12-volt DC power packs and wrapping them up, putting them in a box, all just takes time. And the last thing you want to be doing at 3 o'clock in the morning on a cold night is spending time outside when you don't need to. So I can't stress, it's really revolutionized how I image. So much so, I highly recommend these units. So let's have a quick look in the software, and I'll go through some of the things that you can do and some of the things that you can observe whilst you're imaging with this device. Okay, the first thing you'll need to do before you can attach to the Powerbox is to download the software and the drivers for it. And those are found on PegasusAstro.com/support, and there's a section for each of their Pocket Powerboxes and their other associated utilities and hardware. So as you can see here, we're in the Pocket Powerbox Advanced section. This program here, the setup, is the main utility setup. You also then need to download the drivers for your relevant OS. There's a version for OS X. Unfortunately, I'm not a Mac user, so I can't show you that. And then there's 2 ASCOM drivers. These allow you to control the box for various things through ASCOM enabled software such as APT, Nina, SGP, etc. So I've got all those installed, and you end up with this Pocket Powerbox icon, and then this is the main interface of the Powerbox itself. Up here we've got a connect button, so if we now connect to the unit, my PC is now talking to the Pocket Powerbox Advance. Let's go through some of these numbers. So this voltage here, this is the input voltage I'm providing from my power supply into the Pocket Powerbox. It's what I'm feeding it with. So if you remember earlier, I mentioned to use a good 12 volt 10 amp supply. The reason mine's showing 13.1, 13.3, fluctuating around that 13 mark, is you'll find that higher quality supplies generally are slightly over the 12 volt specification. And that's usually well within tolerance of most devices that require 12 volts. It's always better to be over than to be under. And in my experience, if you buy some really cheap 12 volt supplies off Amazon, which look really attractive from a terms of price, they generally, if I plug those into here, I could show you that they will show like 11.5 and 11.4. Better to be over than to be under. The current here is the ampage that's currently being drawn by the devices connected to the Powerbox. So currently I've got an ASI 2600MC color cooled camera attached. I've got a Sesto Senso focuser, and I've also got a CGX mount which I haven't got switched on at the moment. What you'll see is if I was to cool the camera down, that current would increase to maybe 2-3 amps. If I started slewing the mount, it would then also increase the current to another possibly 3-4 amps, depending on the specification of the kit you've got in there. And this is why you need a really good quality 10 amp supply. I didn't mention earlier that Pegasus also do their own, but I've linked the one I've used from Amazon, which I found really good. And I've actually got 2 Pocket Powerboxes, and I use the same. I bought 2 of these power supplies as well, so I'm really happy with them. They've not let me down. They're reliable and they provide a really good quality 13/12 volt voltage and a guaranteed 10 amp. What we've got over here is the temperature, so that's the temperature in the room. Obviously that would be the temperature outside if I was doing this outside. I'm not, I'm currently sat in my room. This is the relative humidity as a percentage. So currently it thinks it's 44% humidity in my room. And then we've got the dew point. So this is the temperature which the device thinks dew will start to form based on the conditions we've got today. So at 7.9 degrees or below, dew will start to form on surfaces. And I'll explain why this is important when we look at the dew controls further on. Quad output, so I can switch all the ports off or on. I leave it on, and if you remember earlier I said that whatever settings you set in here, the device, if you were not to plug a PC in, will just default to these when it's next powered on. So obviously, just in case I don't have my PC attached, I've left that on. There's also a DSLR output, which we didn't cover earlier, but I'll come back to that if anybody wants to ask me a question in the comments, I'll be happy to answer about that. And then there's an adjust voltage, which is for the special DSLR camera port. Basically, you can get an adapter that looks like it's got a battery on the end for, say, a Canon or a Nikon camera. So the camera thinks it's got a battery, but it's actually being fed off the Pocket Powerbox. So useful for people who don't like to have batteries that basically get very cold in the winter and start affecting, or don't last very long when you're imaging. That's not the main focus of today's chat though. And then down here we've got the dew band heaters. So if you remember on the box there are two ports, there's a dew A and a dew B. Currently they're showing that they're not doing anything, and the reason being is that's because the room is 20.6 degrees and I've got this feature called auto dew turned on. So what this will do is, if we were outside and the temperature was starting to drop and it was getting close to the dew point, it would start to fluctuate and increase these values, which is the power that it's providing to the dew heater. Now the more voltage it provides to the dew heater, the warmer the band gets. If I turn this off, I'm now in full control of what I want to do with those dew heaters, so I can literally slide these up. And what that would do is immediately start turning on the dew band. So I've seen some people do this. They'll literally turn auto dew off and they'll just run them full whack for their night session. Is there anything wrong with that? No, not. I suppose you're using unnecessary power that you don't need to. So I always use auto dew, and you'll see here when you turn that back on it says it's been enabled and it will be remembered each time the device boots up. And of course it recalculates, oh, I don't need to do anything right now because the temperature is more than sufficient to stop dew forming. So that's the front screen. If we're going to the ENV tab, these are the graphs that show the temperature and the dew point and the relative humidity. So what you'll see is, whilst you're imaging at night and the temperature is dropping, you'll start to see that being graphed on here, and also the dew point if that starts changing. It's more for informational purposes than anything. The same with the relative humidity. It'll start to show you that as it fluctuates. I occasionally keep an eye on it in case, sometimes if I'm not using SGP and using another tool, if the temperatures drop sufficiently enough for me to warrant a refocus, I'll use the data in here to determine, has it dropped enough for me to decide that's what I need to do. Next tab is power graphs. So again, it'll show you the input voltage and how well that's doing. So again, a poor quality 12 volt supply to the box, you will see a very spiky graph. I did buy one originally just as a test that I could use for something else or return it. It was horrendous. Really poor voltage supply out of it in terms of 12 volts. Would have probably been fine for something like a CCTV camera that doesn't really care and is not, it's doing one job constantly. And then we've got the ampage draw. So again, you'll see as things change, if I was to go switch my mount on and start slewing, this would start going up. If I start cooling my camera. So again, you can keep an eye on what the ampage values have been over a period of, I think this will start to scale out. I think you can see sort of 15-30 minutes. The reason there's a focus option is you can connect the PegasusAstro focus cube to this box and control it from here. Now I don't have one, that's why there's a focus option in here. And then finally there's the config. So it installs itself as a COM port, as most Astro pieces of kit do. I can turn the LEDs off, so there's a very small blue LED light. So I know some people want absolute no lights on when they're outside imaging. I mean, it's that minor, I don't really bother. We can change the units from metric to imperial. We can reboot the box. Here's another startup setting. So I've said all outputs are on. And then you've got the auto dew aggressiveness. So how much do you want to apply an aggression factor to when it starts to think it needs to turn on the dew bands? I've left this as default, which is 8. Again, you can play with those. I suspect people in different countries will have different requirements based on their humidity and when their dew points are forming during the night. The defaults seem to work out the box though. And then finally on the info screen, we've got a battery level. So there's no battery inside this device that's using, well, there's probably a real-time clock in there to store the settings, to be honest, to keep that powered for that non-volatile memory. But this is the battery. If you were feeding the power box from something like a Celestron or a Skywatcher power tank or a Jackery battery, this would show you the battery level that it thinks that the battery is providing and how much percentage it's got left. Because I've effectively got it plugged into the mains, it will always show 100%. So this is only really useful if you're powering the Pocket Powerbox from a battery itself. And then there's just a little bit more information down here. So the commands sent and received. So this is the Pocket Powerbox software here sending commands down to the unit. So these commands are things like get temperature, get humidity, turn on dew bands, turn off dew bands. And then finally there's firmware and some model and how long it's been up. So the device does auto check if there's any updates and if there's any firmware updates, it's all taken care of. If there is a firmware update, it will automatically do it based on when you first start up the program and it detects it. And then you can finally look at the change log, which just shows the recent changes to the software. So all in all, really good. I can't stress enough that this unit has changed the way and changed the convenience of the way I image on a night. It's probably saved 15 to 20 minutes setup and teardown time, which is always great. It's allowed me to cable manage my mount, so I don't have tons of 5 volt and 12 volt and 5 amp power supplies into the camera, another one into the focuser, another one into the mount, another one into a rotator. It is for me a game changer, so I can't stress it enough. I'm not paid by PegasusAstro to say that. I just really like the device, so much so I've actually bought 2 because I've got a mobile mount and I decided I'm going to power it and maintain the cables in the same way. So overall, really good. So as ever, that's what I've got for you today, folks. If you like the video, please give me a like. If you want to subscribe, please feel free to do so. And hopefully I will see you next time. Clear skies, everybody.